Hi, and welcome to the Madhouse podcast. I know it's been a few days since the last time I did a podcast, so I'm sorry about that, but this is that time when the game is due to be run, and that tends to be a busy time for me here at the Madhouse. So I've been working on getting those turns out, and with a bit of luck, for those of you who are waiting for an update, probably turns out late this evening, I would expect. So a few questions have come in since the last podcast. I've just got a piece of paper here with some notes about them, which I'll read out and then do my best to answer them. So first, David Pennywell says, could we have a podcast, please, about the many guilds in the game and their origins? Seems like a nice idea, David. There are a lot of guilds in Dungeonworld, and many of them have built up over the last 20 years, so they've got quite a rich history. Probably couldn't cover all of them and do them proper justice in a single podcast, but nice idea to kind of feature the guilds and give the game some flavour, show people perhaps who don't play how to flesh it out and what goes on within the game. James Doughty has written to say he's actually sent loads of ideas, so thank you for that, James. He suggested, amongst other things, a podcast about the surrounding geography of the Kingdom of Bereni, but that would obviously have some limited interest, I hope. The whole world is called Myriad, and the game is mainly centred around the Kingdom of Bereni, which sits in the centre of the game world, if you like. But there are kingdoms and other lands all around Bereni, and most of them are now playable. You can go there and visit them, and they're quite different. So a good idea to kind of do that at some point in the future. He also suggests that we might do some tough monster profiles. It'd be fun. There are thousands and thousands of different monsters in Dungeonworld. They've also grown up over a very long time, and some of them are fascinating. It's hard to tell what you would call a tough monster, though, because monsters can be tough for lots of different reasons. They can have a high health and higher damage and dangerous attacks, or attacks that actually do horrible things to you. But they can also be very intelligent, because the game has quite an advanced AI that lets the monsters, I can program the monsters to do all different things. So I can make them particularly hate thieves, or particularly hate elves, or I can make them clever about how they track after someone, and how long they would prepare to chase somebody down, or whether they just give up as soon as you run away. And that all depends on their kind of what their race might suggest, or how intelligent the monster might be. And they really are all very, very different. It's quite subtle. And it's good fun to design monsters in the game. So what I might do, I think, is perhaps bring up a screen on a future podcast showing you how the monsters are created, and give you an idea of how the stats kind of build up to create them. But there are many, many hundreds of stats. Monsters in Dungeonworld are really quite intricate. Another player's asked, why do the turns sometimes run late? Well, it is a game that I run mostly by myself. It's a small company, and we've been doing it for a long time. And lots of things can happen to slow a turn down. So, for instance, if a turn is due to run on Wednesday, but it doesn't run until Friday, that might be because there might be lots of reasons. It might be that, for instance, the American players are mostly postal players, because American players can play by email, play directly with us in the UK. So our American agent mostly handles postal players who still play by the old-fashioned post method. Sometimes there's a problem with that post, and a lot of the turns don't come in, so I might hold up the game waiting rather than have them miss a whole turn and potentially ruin their positions. And try to be flexible where possible, but try not to let it ruin other people's enjoyment. Another thing might be, because the game has been growing for 20 years, bugs do crop up, and one of the things that players understand who've been in the game for a long time is the price of continual growth and new stuff is occasional bugs. And you don't really know how long it's going to take you to fix the bugs until you try to do it. And I stress, these aren't code bugs. There aren't really any, touch wood, there are no code bugs left in the game that I'm aware of. What there mostly are kind of soft code bugs, things that monsters don't behave a certain way, or an item doesn't do quite what you think, or you try and go up a set of stairs and you don't go anywhere. These are done not in the actual main code, but in the soft code editors that I use to create and flesh out the game. And when those things crop up, sometimes they're a very quick fix, and sometimes you go to fix them and you think, oh, this is actually a little bit more complex than I expected, and it takes you a little longer than you thought. And then, of course, I'm just one individual, so there can be times when I don't feel very well, or a family issue arises, or whatever. So these things do tend to happen, but I think broadly we do pretty well. I mean, the turns run once every 2 weeks. Exactly what day they run does vary a little bit, it's fair to say. But let's do what we can to try and improve that and see where we go. Okay, so another thing that has been suggested to me is I might do a podcast about how the dungeons are actually designed, the famous dungeons. So not the small kind of subplot dungeons and places you can stumble upon while just wandering around, but the big dungeons that have been in the game since the beginning, perhaps how they were designed, what's special about them, their specific background. They all have kind of subplots and history involved. And again, I don't think I could do all of that in one podcast because those are big stories, but it might be fun to focus on different dungeons at different times. So that's where we are at the moment. I do hope to keep the podcast going over the weekend, and I'll pick it back up again now and do a bit more. I don't know what you're going to make of the tiny little mug shot of me in the corner of the screen. I'm just messing around with OBS, and it's one of the things you can do, and I've seen other podcasters do. So if looking at my face makes you go, then let me know and I'll take it off. Put something better looking up there. Okay, so all that remains to say is remember to like this post, subscribe, ring the magic bell, and doing so could potentially open the gates of hell and pour forth demons onto the land, but veteran players will likely just say, oh no, not again. Anyway, laters.